Hello everyone, my name is Paul and welcome back to the new news. I hope that everyone's having a fantastic day. I hope that everyone is all right and that you, your friends, and your family are safe. And if not, I hope that you find that safety and security in the very near future. Now, there's been a ton of stuff that's going on. I know that some of you may be wondering what may have happened to me considering I'm wearing an eye patch. I have some medical stuff going on and I have to get an injection in my eye. I do still have my eye. It's okay. But I just am wearing this that way I'm not straining my eye after getting that injection. I don't want to injure something that doesn't need to be. So I'm just taking a precaution, but I'm okay. It's okay. So don't worry about that. So other than that, though, there is something that I would like to share with you that's a little bit kind of troubling. And since I kind of read the statistics yesterday, or not yesterday, but on Wednesday, there was something that kind of hit me. And if you were on our Discord or anything, you may have noted this already or on our Twitter. But here at the New News, we're the news that gives back. And the way we're able to do that is by, through you guys donating to the video description, to the links in the video description below. And it's something that we're always doing. And we're always pushing for. 100% of everything we do is charity, and we're never doing any kind of super chats or anything like that on this channel. No merchandising. 100% charity about. That's what we're 100% about. We're never planning on making a cent off of this. But here's some statistics as to why we are doing this. So Wednesday night stream was 2 hours, 21 minutes, and 38 seconds long. Throughout the duration of that, 124 people died of starvation. 141 children became severely malnourished throughout the world. The average viewer, and the average person watching this, is going to watch it for about 10 minutes and 53 seconds. In that time, 165 people will die and 11 children will become severely malnourished. Throughout the world, there's 345 million people who have food and water insecurities, with 1.8 million children under the age of 5 in the Horn of Africa alone, which are getting put not just into acute, but severe malnourishment. And they are the ones that are most disproportionately affected. So that is why we're here to do this. Not because of just, world hunger, because that is an ongoing problem, but because of other issues as well. Of course, we have natural disasters like Hurricane Fiona and everything going on in Mexico and everything in Taiwan, and of course the war in Ukraine. So please help us get a little bit and help us give back a little bit and put some good back into this world. There's a lot of pretty terrible stuff happening. And if you check out the video description below, you're going to see a ton of different links to help out with that. Every single one of those links, 80% or more of the donations they receive go to helping people. They go to helping people directly through their programs. They go to feed people. They go to support the war effort in Ukraine so it can continue to fight for its liberty. It goes to helping people. And we're always looking for more. So please, if you have some, jump onto our Discord. If you have more organizations, especially in areas we don't cover, please send them to us. We would love to get those added and get these vetted through the stream. We have a bunch that we're currently, going through the stream. We're going through and vetting right now to get it added to the stream, making sure they're good for you guys and they're not terrible things. But with that, if you can't give a lot to these organizations, please give a little. If you can't give anything at all, that's okay too. And one of the best things you can do, at least for us, is to help us grow this project. The more people that come and watch this, the more good we can do throughout the world overall. And that's really what we're wanting to do. We want to put some good back into the world. We want to help people directly affected by the things we talk about here on the news every single day. And you can do that, like, subscribe, share our stuff, join our Discord, join and follow and share our stuff on social media, especially Twitter. And that will really help out and really help grow this thing so we can have even more of an impact and help even more people in a meaningful way. And with that, we're getting ready to roll into the news. And so before we do, please feel free to ask questions for those that are joining with us live tonight. So to give you a little bit of a background, if you may be new to the channel, I well, I technically am an O-352 anti-tank missileman in the United States Marine Corps. I served between 2016 and 2020. My first tour overseas, I was spent 4.5 months in Syria with coalition forces, and I also spent a month and a half in Kuwait with the Crisis Response Force. My second tour, I spent most of my time in Kuwait, as with the Crisis Response Company as the team leader for the Javelin anti-tank missile team. I was also in charge of anti-armor operations at the Baghdad Embassy compound. I was one of the 100 Marines that went and reinforced the compound during the New Year's protests in 2020. And I was also sent to Saudi Arabia, where I trained Saudi Arabian Marines to go into combat down there in Yemen against the Houthi rebels. I am a subject matter expert in anti-armor warfare and armor doctrine, especially against near-peer threats such as Russia and China. And I'm also fully versed in machine gunnery and, of course, basic rifleman skills, convoy escorts, the like of that. And I'm very well knowledgeable in a bunch of other topics as well. However, if you ask something outside of those ranges, I will answer it to the best of my ability. But I always implore you to do your own research. Don't believe everything you hear on the internet. Everybody do your own research. Look into it yourself if any of these interest you, or if you feel like I don't answer a topic quite perfectly enough. And that's okay too. If I make any mistakes and we can discover that, we'll also make corrections to any statements that we say here, such as what we did on Wednesday. So thank you very much. And we're getting ready to jump right into the news here and jump right down into our special report here out of Ukraine, where you jump over here to Kyiv and we get, of course, our child casualty update. So the child casualty update today, of course, is coming from the Prosecutor General's Office of Ukraine. And they say, quote, since the beginning of Russia's full-scale war against Ukraine, 391 Ukrainian children have died and 771 children have been injured. Once again, coming from the Prosecutor General's Office. And we immediately jump over here into the Kharkiv Oblast, where we have a couple of updates. Of course, demining efforts are going to take quite some time. Quote, about 12,000 square kilometers of the Kharkiv region required to mining. The roads are littered with explosive objects. And that's coming from Roman Primush, who's the deputy head of the State Emergency Service in Ukraine in charge of digital development, digital transformations, and digitalization. And as we come down here into Izium, we see that they have completed the exhumation of that mass grave in Izium. The governor, Ole Subinov, said that 436 bodies had been exhumed from the graves, mostly with signs of violent death, including 30 bodies with signs of torture. Only 21 people were soldiers. The rest were civilians, including children. Pravda has reported that a total of 447 people were exhumed, including 215 women, 194 men, 5 children, and 22 military personnel, 11 other persons that have been exhumed with sex not identifiable. Meaning that they are so badly deteriorated they can't immediately identify these individuals or even what gender they are. And they say, he said that the medical experts recorded bodies with ropes around their necks, bound hands, broken limbs, and gunshot injuries. Several men had missing reproductive organs. Coming from Ole Subinov from his telegram. If you want some more info on that, you can always jump over there to Pravda. They do have a piece on this. Just over the Oskil River and in the Donetsk Oblast, we see that Yatskivka has been liberated. Quote, the armed forces established control of the settlement of Yatskivka in the Donetsk region, and that's coming from Alexei Horomov, who is the deputy chief of the main operations department of the General Staff of the Armed Forces of Ukraine. Some of these guys really, really need an acronym for their titles, because that is a mouthful. I don't care what language it's in. As you jump down here, though, we did not see any daily Donetsk updates for the last couple of days. Obviously, that's something a little bit That's, you know, that usually means that something's kind of happening and that he has to kind of take care of other stuff. Well, we do jump down here to Toretsk, where a Russian missile ended up hitting a high-rise apartment building. It collapsed about 3 stories of the building. However, it was reported that while Russia does continue to pound this area with artillery, that this building in particular was actually evacuated some time ago, and that no casualties at this point have been thus far reported. And this is coming from Pavlo Krylenko's official Twitter. This is the Pavlo Krylenko is the head of the Donetsk Regional Military Administration. Take a look.
Человек вытащил. 18 человек с этого подъезда. И один пешком вышел через окно, потому что входа в подъезд нет. С первого этажа он через окно вышел.
Через квартиру чужую, да?
Нет, через
через свою.
Да.
Все пролеты упали.
Пролеты все с 9 по 1 входа нет вообще.
Речі з будинку повикидувала аж до сусіднього. Ось такий має вигляд. Сусідня будівля. Вибито вікна.
So that is the situation in Toretsk. For those that don't quite understand kind of why the Russians are pounding this area so bad, initially, before the Kharkiv counteroffensive, the Russian forces, upon taking Severodonetsk and Lysychansk, kind of made a tactical pause. And what ended up happening was during that tactical pause, they reconcentrated their forces over here by Lyman, and kind of in this general area, and they also reconcentrated their forces here in this part of the Donetsk Oblast. And what they ended up doing is there was a supporting effort up here by Siversk, where Russian forces were pushing, a minor force, but a force nonetheless, was pushing towards Siversk and was pounding this area, while the main force was pushing in areas coming out of the Popasna pocket here, and they were pushing towards Soledar, Bakhmut, and all the way down to Toretsk. Now, if you take a look, the reason why that Slavyansk and Kramatorsk were getting shelled from this general direction, why Russian forces were up here, is because Russia, this is an axis of advance. Slavyansk is a very key town in the Donetsk region. It has a major railway. If you remember when a Tachka U missile fired by Ukraine ended up killing 52 civilians at a railway in Kramatorsk several months ago. This is a major railhead. It means that supplies can be easily brought in and out of Kramatorsk, and that they can move massive amounts of equipment and personnel. It's also a very centralized location, very built up location that allows for a really great point of command and control, as well as communications. It's a great place. It's a great strategic place. Taking Kramatorsk is really the last hurdle in capturing the entirety of the Donetsk Oblast with relative ease, because the rest of the settlements are relatively small and open. But you have to go through Slavyansk to get to Kramatorsk. And out of Lyman, you can see this road that runs right through here, crosses the Siversky Donetsk River, and runs right into Slavyansk. Cut down. This road runs all the way through Kramatorsk and all the way south through Kostanivka, all the way through to Duretsk, and right over here near Pavichny, which is where the Russian lines are currently at. So you can see why this road basically connects all the way from Lyman all the way through both of the major cities, most of the major settlements in the Donetsk Oblast, and back over here to Russian lines, really cutting out this entire swath. Pushing over here by Bakhmut and Soledar means that the Russians are kind of pushing this in, and this provides pressure and kind of begins an encirclement, a wide encirclement movement within the Donetsk region. Now that the Kharkiv counteroffensive has happened, this northern offensive by the Russians can no longer take place. They don't have the manpower or the equipment for it, at least not until those conscripts, which are mostly just cannon fodder, get into here. Likewise, they don't really have the forces here. What they did and managed to get to the outskirts of Soledar, but since then, they've pretty much stalled and bogged down, and it's just been, once again, back to an artillery slugfest. JL asks, where can you find current statistics with estimation of how many people died already? There's some places that mostly large media companies and also the Kyiv Independent who are kind of following that. They are kind of putting together all of this information from all the different regional heads. But if you want kind of the most accurate estimations of casualties, you have to follow each of these regions each of these oblasts has a head of the oblast. The governor is also the governor of the oblast. The political head of the region is also the head of the regional military administration. And so, like whenever we do the Donetsk Daily Update, we always talk about Pavel Korolenko. And his updates, he's the one that's keeping track of all the casualties, dead and wounded here. And he says minus Mariupol and a minus, there's another one. Krasnocharsk? Anyway, but he's the one that's keeping track of all of this, regardless. So that's kind of what he does, just because that's his area of responsibility. Likewise, Sergei Haida for the Luhansk Oblast, Oleg Subinov for the Kharkiv Oblast, all of these, Valentin Reznichenko, that's kind of where they're keeping track. And these are mostly civilian casualties. Ukraine has not released any figures regarding military casualties. Once again, there's an information war going on. You don't want to tell the people just how many people have had to die a day. And we do know that it's a meat grinder. This is very bitter kinetic fighting on both sides. And it's quite a significant... And so both Ukraine and Russia are taking quite significant casualties. Ukraine is going to be lower than Russia because they are the defending force. And military casualties are damn near a science. There's actually several tables you can use. It depends on the country. I believe the UK's is known as the Loves table, that actually estimate casualty rates per day per army, per unit. You can scale it up, scale it down as need be, but it gives you a general idea of how many casualties per day both sides should be taking on average. And so it's pretty, but we do know that both casualty rates are significantly high. Deaths, we're not quite sure, but casualties include both deaths and wounded, as well as if you have captured, if you have had troops surrender or be captured, so those POWs or EPWs, as well as anybody who is missing in action. Filtration camps or concentration camps. We've talked about this a little bit before, and we've said it many times that filtration camps, which is where Ukrainian POWs and forcefully displaced Ukrainian civilians are sent to, are nothing more than just concentration camps with a new name. That's the fact of the matter. It's known with prior experiences and the revelations that came out of the first and the second Chechen wars that being inside of filtration camps means that you'll be deprived of sleep, food, water, and sanitation, and that you'll be subjected to systematic beatings, rape, torture, and extrajudicial or summary executions. You will not be receiving medical treatment. You'll not be receiving anything. In fact, you are more likely to die a very slow and painful death in these places. Pictured here is Mikhail Dayanov, who is one of those that surrendered at the Azovstal. He's a pianist. So he was freed after 4 months of Russian captivity. His wounded hand or his wounded arm is missing 4 centimeters of bone. And while his sister said his physical condition is very difficult, but morally he is very strong and is happy he's back. He says, "I walk and breathe clean, free air." This is a before image. So this is before the Battle of Mariupol. This is Mikhailo Dayanov. This is taken, I'm going to assume, either today or yesterday, as he was just released from Russian captivity. That's him now. You can see the damage to his arm. and how thin he is. This is the same person. The same person. That's him at the Azovstal. And look, you know, despite his injuries, I mean, look how he's okay there. I mean, like despite everything going on, you know, for the terrible conditions, I mean, life sucks, but the man's in fairly good health, all things considering. This is the same person. I've seen many photos. I like history. You know, even the kind of the dark parts of history are important to study, such as the Holocaust. One of the most impactful books of my youth was the book Night by Elie Wiesel. And you know, it's difficult to imagine, you know, years and years and years and years of being in a concentration camp, and the photos that you see from their liberation, and they look like that man after years and years and years of being in a concentration camp. 4 months of torture. And he's not the only one. There's been photo after photo after photo after photo after photo of these guys coming back from Russian captivity as skeletons with signs of torture and beating. Their bodies broken beyond really in many ways any hopes of repair. And while mentally still sound and in great spirits, you have to understand that usually the happiest people are most of the time the most broken inside. That is the reality of these guys. These guys survived a concentration camp. You can't take a look at those photos and not say that they have not been treated according to the Geneva Convention. They have not been treated according to the Geneva Convention. They have not. They wouldn't look like that if they had been. And that is the reality of what Russia is doing to people. Because it's not just them. How many times did we hear on this channel, did we read these quotes from Mariupol of another 1,000 Ukrainian civilians being sent to filtration camps? They're Bezin. And how the Russians on their state media talked about the filtration camp in Donetsk region, which can hold upwards of 100,000 Ukrainians. Just think about that. And it doesn't matter if you live in these occupied regions, if you agree with it or not, the referendum continues to go on. The referendum is being streamlined. It's happening as we speak right now throughout the occupied regions of Ukraine. The point is to have a pseudo-referendum that legally gives Russia the declaration that these areas are now part of the motherland of the Russian Federation. And so that's the whole point of it. There's only one outcome. There's nobody in the occupied regions, in Russia, in NATO, in Ukraine. There's nobody in the world that knows that we all know that there's only one answer. There's only one correct answer. While in a democracy, it should be relatively obvious that you can vote however you wish. It's very obvious that while under occupation, there's only one correct answer, that is. And otherwise, the Russians seem to have brought some individuals who wish to attempt to change your mind if you believe that there are two. So this is the referendum being carried out here within the occupied regions. This is video footage coming from a CCTV security camera inside of one of the apartment buildings here today. Take a look.
А я тут не живу.
Точно?
Да.
Yeah, they have an armed military escort to ask for your vote. And it's not just an isolated incident. Here's another one. Take a look.
Не слышу, что там тарабанишь. Все, потом ладно. Последний пакет, потом на 200.
Это последнее?
На этом да, потом двое на 10.
Да, это 8 заключал вода. Что нет?
А, для этого окна? Нет, 8-10.
А все, мы знаем, это ресторан.
Заходи.
Ну вот, сейчас, стоять.
So you got two examples of what it's like to vote in the occupied regions. Yeah, two guys with their AKs are going to roll up to your door with a couple of ladies, and they're going to knock on your door to see if you're home. Should you answer the door, you have one correct answer. Otherwise, those guys are probably likely there to change your mind. Democracy. Democracy. Yes. See, here's the thing. Russia tried democracy. They tried democracy for, 10 years at maximum. Yeah, they found out it was really, really hard, and then Putin came to power. That's about how democracy in Russia went. In fact, they even changed they had a different national anthem between the fall of the Soviet Union and Putin's rise to power. And then when Putin got into office, of course, he changed the constitution, but he changed it back to the Soviet Union's anthem. He was a little bit successful in the Soviet Union, so he has some ideology. So JL has asked, Paul, what do you think the new conscription might affect the Russian approach to war? And it's 30,000 or it's 300,000 from 18 to 27 years old, right? Fair did correct that. It's 18 to 55. And he says, personally, I believe that if those young boys are going to start experiencing this harsh winter and all casualties as well as their families, they might protest even harder. So the thing is that if you are a conscript in the Russian army, keep in mind the Russians already conscript. They conscript every single year. They have a number, they have a quota of young men that have to serve their time in the military. It's a 1-year conscription. And then after that, they can choose to go into the military. But the most heavily conscripted areas of the Russian Federation are places such as Dagestan and places within Siberia, Chechnya, places that really don't have a lot of built-up facilities. And there's really not a whole lot of other alternatives other than the military, such as, think of like North Korea, except it's in certain areas of Russia. If you live in Moscow or St. Petersburg, you're considered a Muscovite, and you're considered a true Russian. And you are kind of the more educated, better well off, just because during the Soviet Union, the demographics of the people that lived in Moscow and St. Petersburg were usually those that had good standing within the Communist Party. So they were, generally speaking, more educated, had more opportunity, a little bit wealthier, nicer facilities, which, is to say what it is. I mean, it's the Soviet Union, but still. So that's where you see most of the conscription. Poorer areas of Russia, basically ethnic groups that are other than Muscovite, while areas such as St. Petersburg and Moscow maintain a lower conscription quota, so that way it doesn't heavily affect their populace. Which is why you're seeing so many people from, say, Chechnya and Dagestan and the Far East areas and Siberia really fighting in this war, and people that just did not have any other opportunity. The best life they could have is the military. It's the way to get a pension. It's the way to get a constant paycheck to make sure you're always fed and that your family can be fed. Introducing 300,000 troops in a fast order such as this, and we'll get to this a little bit later too, is not going to help the Russian war effort. The Russian war effort is suffering significantly because of manpower issues. That is true, and 300,000 troops, 300,000 warm bodies that will soon be cold, certainly do help the manpower aspect of that in the numbers game. However, war is not a numbers game. You can see this time and time again throughout history. I mean, the Battle of Thermopylae, anybody, that's also known as the Battle of the 300 for those that actually watched the movie and didn't know about the actual battle. That thing actually happened, by the way. So it's true. Numbers aren't everything in warfare. It's a lot to do with equipment. It's a lot to do with willingness to fight. Morale is a huge factor in that, which is why you see the United States go to huge lengths, and other coalition partners go to huge lengths to, boost morale in areas that they're in fighting. Even in Syria, we were living on basically a spoonful of rice and a spoonful of chicken per meal per day. And I mean like a cereal spoonful. I'm not talking about a whole lot. But on Christmas, on Thanksgiving, and on New Year's, they brought in a huge amount they actually lifted some bans on certain aircrafts that were grounded at the time and had huge supply shipments come in of turkey and chicken and beef and mashed potatoes and ice cream and all sorts of stuff that we would never otherwise get in Syria. But it was a huge morale thing. They made sure that we had MoraleSat computers so that way we could link up to the internet while we're out there. While it wasn't great, I had internet access while I was in Syria, so I could say, I could tell my family I was okay, every once in a while. Morale things are a huge factor. We know that the Russian force really does not have a whole high thing of morale. If you look at times of drafting that were generally unpopular in opinion, such as the Vietnam War, which is a great example, you see that those that are drafted to fight in a war, generally speaking, are not the kind of people that are so interested in fighting the war. It's already a kind of a morale drain to start with. So you already start with kind of a low morale with troops that don't want to be there. and they are now putting themselves into a position of life and death, which is already a morale dropper in and of itself. What camaraderie is there is completely just kind of destroyed, as your friends are immediately, you're picking them up and shipping them home in buckets, if you're shipping them home at all. That's kind of the situation with the conscripts. They are cannon fodder. They are trying to play a numbers game. The war isn't a numbers game. Russian equipment is inferior to what Ukraine is fielding. While Ukraine may not have the numerical superiority, Russia has the air superiority, in all regards, should have the air superiority if we went by numbers. Russia does not have air supremacy over Ukraine whatsoever, and you see them suffering greatly for it. So 300,000 troops will not change anything other than there will be 300,000 warm bodies that will quickly become cold ones on the front lines as they get shoved into a meat grinder with minimal training, minimal equipment, and very, very bad planning on their military leadership. That's all that 300,000 troops will do. As we continue here, talking about the Ukrainian Air Force, we see a couple of Su-27s that were out and flying today here on the Donbass that were flying close formation during a nice morning air patrol mission. Take a look. Nice close formation. This is coming from Anton Gerashenko, and it's pretty. He's talking about how cool it would look if these were F-18s or F-16s. They're really wanting NATO aircraft now, and I can understand why. Rooster Cyburns asked, "How can you live on a spoonful of chicken?" Because you buy off the locals to supplement. That's how you do it. Man, I ate a lot. I ate a lot of pita bread. I'll tell you what. They make really good pita, by the way. And a lot of Syrian burgers. And let me tell you, actual Syrian shawarma is fantastic. If you ever have a chance to go to like a Middle Eastern or Mediterranean food restaurant, try shawarma. It will change your look on food. I swear to God. It's amazing. It's amazing. JL asks, what is the value of thermal vision in the upcoming months? It maintains its value. I wouldn't say it increases or decreases. Having thermal vision isn't going to increase or decrease really anything in the upcoming months than what it already provides. But thermal vision is only great in certain circumstances. Thermal vision doesn't really give you very good depth of field. The more valuable, I think, would be rather than thermal vision. While it's great for spotting targets, I think night vision overall is going to be cheaper in many aspects. I mean, we're still talking about military grade stuff, but I think night vision, even if it's just the older PVS-14s for all Ukrainian troops, would do an immense amount more good for Ukraine's war effort on the ground than it would be to supply thermal vision to everybody. I think that it's great for like squad leaders and certain reconnaissance organizations, reconnaissance groups and special operations forces. But we didn't carry thermal vision like all of us. We had certain sight systems that were thermal, but that we kept on like post. We'd have like one on a post, so that way we could scan night vision. We could pick out heat signatures. It's another tool. It has its purposes, but it's not great for it's not like a fix-all for optics. I think that night vision would do much better wonders in order allowing Ukraine to do more nighttime raids and stuff, being able to readily field that. Isn't it like the Ukrainians are going to be able to see Russian locations much better while they're trying to warm up in the trenches, making fire camps? Not really. I mean, the heat signatures aren't going to be... It's hard to describe. Like heat signatures are going to pick up everything from like the glow of like somebody's body to the glow of like a fire to even... You would not believe how much it actually increases like smoking a cigarette. But a fire is also going to produce light, and the way a night vision optic works is it actually amplifies ambient light, which is why even if there's like, if it's completely dark out, no moon, no nothing, you really can't see anything with night vision very well, because it amplifies the light that's around you. It doesn't create its own light. That's how night vision works. So if they have a fire and you just have regular night vision, you're going to see that fire really well, even if it's just the backlighting of it. And you're going to be able to say, oh, there's a trench there. You don't necessarily need thermal optics to do that. I mean, it's just, it's nice to have, but not. I think night vision is just a cheaper and much better solution. That'd be much more quantitative and much more advantageous for the Ukrainians, in my personal opinion. I think night vision. I think that thermal vision optics are still important, though. Ukrainian helicopters continue to operate as close air support. I've talked about this before, and we've seen it kind of at, I've talked about and described this a little bit before of why they fly so low. They fly what's called nap of the earth, which is where you're flying so low, you're actually in between the trees and everything. So when you're talking about nap of the earth flight, the whole point of flying that low in a helicopter or a jet is to limit how long somebody has to acquire you as a target in an aircraft and shoot you down. So this is some Ukrainian helicopters operating on the front lines, and they're flying nap of the earth, but you can actually see why that's important. So I figured it was important to show here to kind of follow up with what I've said before. So, one, these are very impressive pilots, but watch this tree line here and watch this opening. So you can see that helicopter is flying low, nap of the earth, and immediately dives underneath the trees. And you only have this window right here. You only have in between those tree lines to acquire them as a target and fire on them if you have a man-portable anti-aircraft system. So if you have like a Strela or an Igla, if you're Russian, you only have that long to lock onto the target. That's why they are flying this low. So, to kind of give you an idea as to why they're flying this low. And it's not just them, the Russian pilots are doing this too. But that is why, because it does not provide, I mean, you can see he's open and it's 1, 2, and he's gone. Not very long to acquire the target and shoot it down. And so this is kind of a last minute one, but this is demining your trench. So this is a Ukrainian trench. A grenade never went off and it landed inside the trench. So this is the demining technique of the Ukrainian soldiers in this trench. Take a look. Straight off of TikTok.
Вона, блядь, не зірвалась. О, блядь. Вася сапер. А ну потряси її, може йобне.
Бля, зараз в'їбемо, так, сука. Може ще раз купати який?
Nope. I don't play with hand grenades. Nope. One time we were sitting on post and somebody had messed with the hand grenades on post. And you can actually take the pins out of a hand grenade and you can put them back. And there's actually a thing to switch it from a right-hand grenade to a left-handed grenade, but you have to pull the pin. So that's so when we were on posts, somebody on the previous post rotations, had actually swapped from a right-hand grenade to a left-hand grenade, all 3 grenades that were on our post. And a gunny came up and found it while he was inspecting our post while we were on it, and he told us to fix it. That was one of the most nerve-wracking things to do in my life. It was wild. I'm sitting there, hand grenade in hand. All right, pull the pin, hand the pin to your buddy, hold the grenade so that way the spoon doesn't fly off. Have him put the pin back in on the right side. Make sure it's secure. Put the grenade to the side. Take an hour as a breather. Smoke about 10 cigarettes. Go back and do the second one. And just keep going it over and over again. So JL asked for an explanation as to what's happening. So the hand grenade didn't go off. It either Russian threw it into their trench, or they tried to throw it and ended up landing back in their trench. Bad frag. And so the guy's going. So the guy goes up, and they're all sitting there and they're laughing because they're like, "Man, this is comedy." You have to kind of just laugh when things get bad enough, and that's what's happening here. And so the guy goes up and he takes like a trash can and a shovel and he covers it with the trash can, and he grabs the shovel and he kind of scoops it underneath it like you're trapping a spider, and he walks off and you can hear him say "Suka," which is like, "Fuck, man!" Like if this thing goes off, like I'm probably gonna die anyway, but at least some of it's trapped. But that's what's happening there. He's taking away the hand grenade, so that way, when it does go off, it's not going to hurt anybody. And if you have a trench, you see he's walking into there. But if you have a trench, most of the time there's actually a thing. It's called the grenade pit in your trench, and it's so if someone throws a hand grenade into your fighting position, you actually dig like a hole that you can kick the hand grenade into, and it blows up in front of the trench and blows up and out of the hole, and it doesn't like blow up inside the trench and kill and injure anybody. It's called a grenade sump. Russian Mi-8 helicopter was shot down here in the Zaporizhzhia Oblast. Once again, this is why you're supposed to fly nap of the earth and not at just kind of like a cruising altitude. Some Russian pilots, I don't feel like have learned that lesson yet. These are about to.
Далеко, да? Попал! Попал!
Друже, походу это то, что ты отработал. Твоя вертушка.
And that is one dead Mi-8, that's for sure. Up here in the Zaporizhzhia area, a hotel was struck in Zaporizhzhia. Quote, Russians launched 9 rockets on the civilian infrastructure of Zaporizhzhia in the morning. A 65-year-old employee of the hotel died as a result of the shelling. And that's coming from Alexander Storuk, who's the head of the Zaporizhzhia Regional Military Administration. So jump up here and into Dnipro. Iranian-built kamikaze drones ended up attacking Dnipro. Russia has begun to really heavily utilize Iranian-built drone systems in the war, seeing the importance maybe a little bit late thus far, but still trying to compensate their lack of drone systems and to counter Ukrainian NATO-designed weapon systems. One was shot down over Dnipro today.
Воно чума якась.
Давайте, ПВО, давайте. Нема в нас чим, блін, підпитись. Ну давай! Блядь, есть. Офигеть! А я засняла. Да.
You can see right before it impacts, right before that thing detonates, you can see the munition come in from the side here. You can see that somebody ended up firing a missile at this thing to shoot this thing down. Reportedly, the air defenses or the air defense forces of Ukraine shot down about 6 of these things today. And then you can see it, and then there's another video someone else took of it after it exploded midair. It fell here.
Задержка со звуком.
So, Rooster Sideburns asked, what was that? That is a, so that is, I believe it's called the Shahel 136? Shaheed. It's the Shaheed 136 kamikaze drone. Yeah. So it's called the Shaheed 136 kamikaze drone. It was designed and built by Iran. See if I can find a good image of it for you guys. Yeah, here we go. So this is the Shaheed 136. This is what they're talking about shooting down. This is kind of what you're seeing being shot down from Ukraine. These were built and supplied by Iran. Iran also attempted to supply these to the Houthi rebels in Yemen. It's one of their major drone systems. This is the Iranian answer to the U.S. kamikaze drones that we built. So that's kind of the whole point. Everyone's seeing the versatility of these things. Believe it or not, the ideology of turning drones into a weapon is more or less actually an insurgent idea. You see this heavily being done by, say, the Islamic State, who used to strap grenades to these things, and they would fly them into these places. The ability to use these, industrializing that technique and purposely building them, it turns them in basically controllable V1 rockets from like World War II. It's pretty impressive. He said, Rooster Sideburn says, so they're like bombs. That's exactly what they are. They are kamikaze drones. You can fly these things, and then you can lock on and immediately like slam into a target. That's the whole point of them. 2 people were killed and 9 were injured in Russian shelling over in Nikopol. Quote, the Russian forces shelled Nikopol Tamarhanets in the Dnipropetrovsk region. 2 people were killed and 9 injured. The shelling also damaged the power lines and left 2,200 families without electricity. It's coming from Valentin Reznichenko, who's the head of the Dnipropetrovsk Regional Military Administration. And JL says, Ukraine gets 800 Taiwan-made carpet bomber revolver 860s. Any news about it? Did you see any info if those were used anywhere or delivered? I have not seen any information regarding the revolver drones that were made by Taiwan so far. We haven't at least we haven't seen any major like combat footage of them. But there's also other drone systems that we haven't seen combat footage of yet. It may not ever see any combat, such as the Phoenix Ghost that was purposely built for them. Successful strikes do continue within the Kherson Oblast as the fighting continues there. Quote, the armed forces of Ukraine destroyed 3 Russian 152mm self-propelled howitzers, 2 S-19 Mista-S, a 152mm self-propelled howitzer, 2 A-65 Mista-B, 3 tanks, 2 armored vehicles, 2 command posts near Berislav and Novokakovka, and enemy ammunition depots in the Berislav region. That's coming from Operational Command South. But as we come over here into Odessa, the main topic of the day is that kamikaze drones ended up striking the port of Odessa today. Kamikaze drones made by Iran and given to Russia have struck the Ukrainian port city of Odessa. They, along with the multi-purpose drones, some of which have been shot down, are being heavily utilized by Russian forces, as we've had seen, of course, these several strikes and destroyed drones throughout Ukraine in the past about 48 to 72 hours. Quote, the Russian army attacked Odessa with kamikaze drones from the sea. As a result, a civilian died. 2 drones destroyed the administration building in the port area. 1 Shaheed 136 was shot down over the sea by Ukrainian air defense forces. That's coming from Operational Command South. and we do actually have some video footage from today. So this is one of those drone systems flying over the port.
Просто мне только Димон рассказывал за них, что они нихуя не сбивают.
So that one must have been one of the first ones to fly in, or the first one to fly in, and someone just noticed it. And then this one is obviously, they've already had probably the first couple strikes now from these things, because take a look what happens. Everyone and their mother began shooting at this thing. Like, if there is anybody that had a rifle in the city, they opened fire on this thing immediately. And I can't say I blame them, but obviously that one did end up landing. Sci-Fi says, could they have made them any louder? Probably not. I'm sure these things are also destined to have a higher altitude. By the way, if you look at the video footage of the testing they did to advertise the Shahed 136, they didn't even detonate. So the thing didn't even detonate. And actually, the video shows the ground, the impact site detonating right before it lands because they set it up. They didn't actually detonate anything. Was it shot down? That one is questionable because it has the same idea of it seems to have the right trajectory of the drone actually impacting its target. So I do not believe that one was shot down just by the way it looks. It doesn't look like that was shot down. It looks like that hit its intended target, that they did not end up hitting it. It's very, very, very difficult to shoot down a drone. It is very difficult. Unless you have like a missile to lock onto it, it's very, very difficult to shoot down a drone. We, at first, when we got to country, there was a lot of ISIS drones that were flying around our outpost in Syria, and we were shooting at them. And then they said, don't shoot the drones. We're wasting way too much ammo trying to shoot them down. We're not having a lot of success. But I found out that if you take your IR laser, for at least these work for quadcopters, if it has a camera. If you take your IR laser or your PEC sight on your rifle and you turn it to high, if you take out the blue screw and you turn it all the way to high, and this is for any Ukrainian troops that may be listening, then what you end up doing is and you hit it, you can actually hit the drone. It will actually burn out the lens on the camera and it will screw up a bunch of the sensors on it, and it will actually end up crashing itself because it can't like control it and it can't tell where it's at. So it ends up crashing. If not, the operator ends up crashing the drone. So if you happen to be a Ukrainian soldier that has a PEC 16 or PEC 15 like infrared laser sight, use your and you see like a quadcopter or something, you can use the sight. You can use your laser sight and burn out the actual camera, and it will act. Because it's so powerful. If you take out the blue screw and turn it all the way up, it's so powerful that it'll actually burn out the camera completely, and it'll be useless. It burns out the lens on it. I used to take out ISIS drones doing that. It worked much better than shooting at them. Kamikaze drones don't quite work like that as well, but you could always try. Ukrainian Air Force here reportedly shot down an Iranian-made Mohajer 6 multi-purpose drone off the coast of Ukraine. This is the first time Ukrainians have shot down such a system in the duration of the war. It shows the extent of support that Iran has been giving to Russia. I mean, take a look at this thing. This is a big drone. So sorry about that, guys. But so that right there, it's an Iranian built drone. It's a multi-purpose drone system, and what this does is it's kind of like the Iranian version of the Bayraktar. So the whole purpose of this is it can take off and it can carry like small munitions, and fire them at the basically whatever their target is. It's like the Iranian version of a Bayraktar is what this is. So yeah, so just to give you guys an idea. Yes, I know I was muted. I'm not very good at this whole streaming thing. And more grain ships are leaving port. 11 ships left the port of Odessa region along the grain corridor. A total of 201,000 metric tons of food for the countries of Asia and Africa are on board. That's coming from the Ukrainian Seaports Authority. So once again, we're still seeing that grain initiative is being heavily utilized and is going to be fixing some of those global markets. And with that, that's actually all of the news inside of Ukraine. But we begin to move over immediately up into the area of Russia as we get into our international news, because there's been some developments in Russia too. And the first one that we actually have is over here, and this is actually in the Belgorod Oblast, and that's because the village of Dvoluchnoy actually took friendly fire. And so it was hit by Russian-made S-300 and S-400 missiles. Originally destined for Ukraine, they fell short here in the border city. And you can see it's right here along the border. And the design of the S-300 originally is to be a SAM system, or a surface-to-air missile system. But Russia converted quite a quantity of its S-300 and S-400 battery missiles to actually hit surface targets. They're not very accurate, but the reason behind this is because they're running into difficulty. They're facing a lack of purpose-built long-range missiles such as the Iskander-M and the Caliber, because they've used most of theirs up throughout the duration of the war, and they do not have the production to readily make more of them. They require a lot of Western parts. We've even seen many of them now are including stuff from Roscosmos, meaning these were dual-purpose parts originally given to the Russian space program prior to the sanctions hitting. So that's kind of what we're seeing here, and we're seeing that these are running out, and now they're so bad that they're even hitting their own cities. Take a look. Take a look at that crater. That's huge. That's a big crater. Keep in mind, they're firing these at Ukraine. So imagine that landing, because they're firing these at like Kharkiv every day. So think about those who are landing in Kharkiv every single day, and this one just happened to hit a village, and you can see the impact that that has. And these are hitting apartment buildings and everything else. So, I mean, you have to imagine the amount of destruction. Their entire section of Kharkiv, which are completely destroyed. Up here in Russia, there are several recruitment offices currently under fire right now. Recruitment offices in at least 6 cities in the country have been set on fire amid protests against the order to mobilize parts of Russia's reservists on Wednesday, September the 21st. So far, fires have been reported in St. Petersburg, Orenburg, Zhiny Novgorod, Tolati, and Khabarovsk, and Kamyshin. Those are the cities. No injuries have been reported at any of the locations so far, though. So, they are not happy that this is happening. People are taught, and this is not the first time we've seen recruitment offices receiving their fair share of Molotov cocktails. Take a look.
Ну, ничего страшного. С чулком на голове.
Yeah, so, yeah, a lot of people are not happy about the fact that the 300,000 people have been mobilized. Once again, this was not a popular decision. A lot of people thought this was going to happen on the May 9th Victory Day parade, but it didn't happen. It was deemed probably too much of a risky move, because even general mobilization in Russia really shows desperation even to your own people. For a war that you're supposedly winning, needing to mobilize 300,000 additional troops does not send a good signal even to your own population. And when you're announcing something like that, that's very difficult for them to swallow. And it also means that a lot of people are affected, especially in areas such as Moscow and St. Petersburg, once again, where it's not those regions that there are poorer areas with no real opportunity and not really anything else happening, and they're already kind of under the thumb of Russia. Moscow and St. Petersburg, however, where these people aren't getting conscripted in the military as heavily, the war's not really impacting them outside of some stuff that they can't get anymore that Russia's desperately trying to replace, to even go as far as making their own McDonald's, even though everything's moldy. But they're going that far in many ways, and Russia is, you take great care, you see them taking great care not to piss off people in Moscow and St. Petersburg. They don't care what happens to people in like Dagestan or in Chechnya or in Siberia or in the East. They do not care. These are people that they kind of see as kind of lesser to them. They're not true Muscovites. They're not true Russians. Sure, they're Russian, but they're not really Russian. They're not Muscovites. Nonetheless, mobilization began, or it has begun, and it has been going forward, and we're seeing quite a few interesting videos coming out of this. A lot of people drunk, but just take a look.
Нихуя, все вылазят. Все вылазят. Нихуя, мы приехали.
Две шеренги строим.
Пошел ты нахуй с этими 2 шеренгами.
Снова строится, Марк.
Опять нахуй строить.
На подготовку. Едем, я нихуя не понял. Это что за хуйня? Это тревожный чемоданчик. Едем на Камчатку. Пацаны, мужики, все
Is that a whole bottle of vodka? Damn! Someone cue Midland's drinking problem, please.
Это все тут. Все нормально. Все живы, здоровы пока.
Вот армия наши чуваки, блядь. Второй, блядь, вообще спать уснул.
I mean, so many of these guys are just piss drunk as they're going here. And there's so many of them, too.
Ебать, во! Сколько нас вообще, целая орава. Куда идем, хуй его знает, но мы идем. Ебать. Чисто стадо, бойцов, нахуй.
Хуя, аж пыль идет, ёбаный рот.
Ебать, нихуя. Вообще. Охуенно. Пизда. Ебать. О, сколько нас. Чисто приморцы, блядь. Просто вывели, прикинь.
I mean, these guys are just... But some of them are trying to get out of it already. Take a look at this guy. He's trying to get out of the mobilization here by hurting himself. Take a look.
Бей! Бей! Иди! Пускай сам! Сам бей! Сам бей! Сильнее! Автопром себе головы нах! Сильнее! Раз! Еще! Давай! Смотри, мячины какие делают! Хорош! Нормально, заебись! Еще! Еще! Сильней! Последний раз! Только сильней! Еще разок! Капот мнется! Ну нихуя себе! Молодец! Мужчина! Дай 5, мужчина! Ебать, ты понял, какая хуйня, ебать! Я так не смогу! Ну давай, заключительная серия! Вот сюда! Вот сюда! Опа! Еще! Зашел! Еще! 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 Давай! Ты его, суку, пока не пробьешь, блядь! Давай! 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 Еще!
If anyone's ever seen, like, Fight Club, where a guy beats himself up because he's got, like, getting fired or something, it's like that, but drunk Russian version. I just... He's also pissed drunk, very obviously. But, like, I can't believe... So, I want you to imagine... So, everyone... I want you to imagine... This is the 300,000 troops you're getting ready to send into one of the bloodiest wars that we have seen in the last 80 years. And this is who's going to be fighting. So, no, I am not worried whatsoever about the fact that they're sending 300,000 troops into Ukraine. Because ultimately, most of these guys that you've seen on these videos are going to either be killed or wounded in their first action. Or they're going to desert or surrender. We've seen, if you've ever seen videos of draftees during Vietnam, you know that they were much more serious. And they also weren't really wanting to go. They were much more serious about this. The problem with not telling your population about what's happening with the war is they don't realize the seriousness of the situation should you need them. They don't understand the seriousness of the war. They don't understand how many casualties they have taken. They don't know how many casualties they've taken. No one's telling them that. They don't know how many tanks have been destroyed. They don't know how many troops have been killed and wounded. They're not getting those videos of Putin going to a military hospital with all of the wounded troops because they don't want anyone to know about the wounded troops. So they don't realize, none of these guys realize that they are literally walking to their deaths. Is what is happening. They think they're going to go there, they're going to stand some posts, they're going to beat some peacekeepers, maybe fight some Nazis, and then they're going to move on. That's their mentality. They're going to come home a hero of the motherland, of Mother Russia, and that everything's going to be okay. They're going to have a pension, they're going to have fought a war, they're going to get to wear the ribbon of St. George, and it'll be fantastic. These guys... I don't know if anyone's ever played Warhammer 40k before, but these guys are literally like the Imperial Guard of Warhammer 40k, like the Dawn of War series. Or if you send enough guys, they'll eventually run out of ammunition. Like that's the whole mentality here. Is just, I understand that this quote attributed to Stalin is a quality all of its own. Even though no one knows if he actually said that. But these guys are going to die. Like, the majority of these guys are going to be dead or wounded in a week. The third Russian army that was sent in there, the third group, was sent in. And in 72 hours, they had taken 80% casualties. They didn't last 3 days. An entire army, not a BTG, an entire army. All of third group, all of third corps went in and immediately got wiped out in 72 hours. Max says possibility of a lot of friendly fire under these conditions. If they stay that pissed drunk, certainly. That is Russia's finest. So, if anyone argues that Russia is sending them, it hasn't sent their best stuff yet, just show them that video because that is their best stuff. However, pro-war rallies were held across Russia today. Whether that's government-sponsored or not, we don't know. But pro-war rallies were held across Russia today. It really shows kind of a big turnout in support of the war from the Russian people. It really kind of the complete opposite of what we were seeing yesterday and parts of today as well. Take a look.
Злые чары сниму, станет светлой земля моя, а не в черном дыму. И улыбку пошли для своих сыновей, и прости
We have a cool rock song on this channel too. It's called "Go On Home, Russian Soldier, Go On Home." We play it at the end of every single one. Every single episode. Over here in Geneva, though, it's not nearly as interesting or funny. Today, the UN's Commission of Inquiry for the United Nations Human Rights Council for Ukraine has released a briefing with their current findings on the conflict. Take a listen. So this is just a part of it. We'll go through the whole thing here in a moment.
Based on the evidence gathered by the Commission, it has concluded that war crimes have been committed in Ukraine. A number of attacks we investigated had been carried out without distinguishing between civilians and combatants. This included some attacks with cluster munitions or multi-launch rocket system and airstrikes in populated areas. We were struck by the large number of executions in the areas that we visited. The Commission is currently investigating such deaths in 16 towns and settlements. We have received credible allegations regarding many more cases of executions, which we are documenting further. The age of victims of sexual and gender-based violence ranged from 4 to 82 years. The Commission has documented cases in which children have been raped, tortured, and unlawfully confined. Children have also been killed and injured in indiscriminate attack with explosive weapons.
Let that sink in. But there's so much more to unpack. Because this is coming from the website of the United Nations Human Rights Council, from the Office of the High Commissioner. This was ordered in May. This is when the inquiry was ordered by the United Nations. And here's what it says. Distinguished President, Excellencies, together with Ms. Jasmininka Dizumher and Mr. Pablo de Grief, I will present an update of the progress of the work of the Independent International Commission of Inquiry on Ukraine in conformity with the Council's Resolution 49-1 adopted in March of 2022. Last time the Commissioners and I were present at the Human Rights Council was in May this year. The Council then requested the Commission in Resolution S34-1 to address events that took place in late February and March of 2022 in areas of Kyiv, Chernihiv, Kharkiv, and Sumy, and to brief the Council on the progress of the inquiry as parts of its oral update in September. Consequently, we have so far mainly focused on the events in those 4 regions. Tomorrow will mark 7 months since the outset of hostilities in Ukraine, and we are concerned by the suffering of the that the armed conflict in Ukraine has imposed on the civilian population. This is illustrated by the figures updated regularly on the OHCHR concerning deaths and injuries by the UNHCR with respect to refugees and internally displaced persons. The recent discovery of yet additional graves illustrates that the gravity of the situation. Allow me first to make some general remarks. The Commission has focused on events in view of their gravity, their significance in demonstrating patterns of alleged violations, and possibility to gain access to victims, witnesses, and supporting documentation. It seeks to coordinate its efforts with the many entities carrying out investigations in order to avoid duplication and re-traumatization of victims. The security of victims is at the center of our work, and we ensure a strict respect to the do no harm and confidentiality principles. We would like to express our deep appreciation to victims and witnesses who have shared their stories. The Commission, which is independent and impartial, has sought cooperation and dialogue with relative governments. We appreciate the access and cooperation extended to us by the government of Ukraine. Our attempts to engage the constructive dialogue with Russian Federation authorities have, regretfully, so far not been successful, but we will persist in our efforts. Distinguished President, Excellencies, I will now return to our investigation in the regions of Kyiv, Chernihiv, Kharkiv, and Sumy. The Commission has visited 27 towns and settlements and has interviewed more than 150 victims and witnesses. We have inspected sites of destruction, graves, places of detention and torture, as well as weapon remnants, and consulted a large number of documents and reports. The mission met with government authorities, international organizations, the civil society, and other relevant stakeholders. Based on the evidence gathered by the Commission, it has concluded that war crimes have been committed in Ukraine. The following is an example of the findings and observations we have made thus far, starting with the conduct of hostilities. Regarding with the conduct of hostilities, the use of explosive weapons with wide areas of effects in populated areas is a source of immense harm and suffering for civilians. We observed firsthand the damage that explosive weapons have caused to residential buildings and infrastructure, including schools and hospitals. In Kharkiv City, explosive weapons devastated entire areas of the city. We note that according to the Office of the High Commissioner of Human Rights, most of the recorded deaths were caused by the use of such weapons. The devastation is one of the factors explaining why a third of Ukrainian population has been forced to flee. One older woman who fled as hostilities raged in the Kharkiv area told us, "I don't live, quote, I don't live, I just exist. I have nothing left in my soul." Indiscriminate attacks. A number of attacks we investigated were carried out without distinguishing between civilians and combatants, including some attacks with cluster munitions or multi-launch rocket systems and airstrikes in populated areas. As for violations against personal integrity, we were struck by the large number of executions in the areas that we visited. The Commission is currently investigating such deaths in 16 towns and settlements, and we have received credible allegations regarding many more cases of executions, which we are documenting further. Common elements of such crimes include prior detention of victims, as well as visible signs of executions on the bodies, such as hands tied behind backs, gunshot wounds to the head, and slit throats. Witnesses provided us with consistent accounts of ill treatment and torture, which were carried out during unlawful confinement. Some of the victims reported that after initial detention by Russian forces in Ukraine, they were transferred to the Russian Federation and held for weeks in prisons. Interlocutors described beatings, electric shocks, and forced nudity, as well as other types of violations in such detention facilities. After being reportedly transferred into detention in the Russian Federation, some victims have disappeared. As regard these four areas, we have processed 2 incidents of ill treatment against Russian Federation soldiers by Ukrainian forces. While few in numbers, such cases continue to be the subject of our attention. Sexual and gender-based violence. Investigating cases related to sexual and gender-based violence presents specific challenges. The Commission has found that some Russian Federation soldiers committed such crimes. These acts amount to different types of violations of rights, including sexual violence, torture, and cruel and inhuman treatment. There are examples of cases where relatives were forced to witness the crimes. In the cases we have investigated, the age of victims of sexual and gender-based violence ranged from 4 to 82. The Commission has documented cases in which children have been raped, tortured, and unlawfully confined. Children have also been killed and injured in indiscriminate attacks with explosive weapons. The exposure of the repeated explosions, crimes, forced displacement, and separation from family members deeply affected their well-being and mental health. Distinguished President, Excellencies, the Commission will continue to the inquiry related to the 4 regions mentioned in Resolution of May 2022 and will gradually devote more of its resources to its general mandate in the first resolution, which is both geographically and thematically broader. Issues of interest will include filtration camps, alleged forced transfer of people, and conditions under which expedited adoption of children are allegedly taking place. In this brief update, we have concentrated mainly on the violations against personal integrity. authority. Depending on the availability of evidence, the Commission will seek to investigate other types of violations, including the destruction of civilian infrastructure, the appropriation and destruction of economic resources, violations of the right to food, and legality of changes of local administration, which may have far-reaching consequences. In addition to making recommendations regarding criminal accountability, the Commission will, consistent with its victim-centered approach, make recommendations about other dimensions of accountability to which victims also have rights. We look forward to cooperation with all relevant actors to pursue the task entrusted to us by the Human Rights Council. Thank you. Now, I understand that's long for me to have to go through and read that. But think about that. Think about what I just read. And what you've heard. Sexual violence victims ranging the ages of 4 to 32 years old, some of which were forced to watch such crimes while the Russians were raping and murdering their families and friends. They were forced to watch. Do you know where this kind of stuff took place? Something comes to mind. It's called the Rape of Nanking, if you've ever heard of it. This is conducted by the Japanese after they took Nanking, China. They are torturing and executing people. They're forcefully displacing and then disappearing them. From the UN's own mouth. From the UN's own mouth here. This continues to fit the immense amount of war crimes that we have talked about so extensively. This isn't Ukraine saying this. This is the United Nations saying this. In their investigative report. The United Nations. And they have 2 cases of ill treatment of Russian Federation soldiers by Ukrainian troops. I said, and continue to say, Ukraine has certainly committed war crimes. Certainly committed war crimes. I guarantee you that there is, without a doubt in my mind, a Russian prisoner of war who is executed. Extrajudicially. No questions asked. Bullet to the back of the head. It's happened. There are Russian troops that have been beaten. Both sides have committed war crimes. That is certain. It's a war. I guarantee you both sides have committed war crimes. However, the vast scale is incomprehensible for the Russian side. War crimes or not, these are 2 separate stories. The war crimes on the part of the Ukrainians are those of individuals who are going a step beyond their mandate. The Russians are systematic. And when it's systematic, it's a crime against humanity. Which means it's a genocide or an ethnic cleansing. This is the United Nations. This is not to be disputed. And not only this, but the Commission, which is independent and impartial, has sought cooperation with and dialogue with relevant governments. We appreciate the access and cooperation extended to us by the government of Ukraine. Our attempts to engage in a constructive dialogue with Russian Federation authorities have, regretfully, so far not been successful. We will persist in our efforts. The Russians are not cooperating. The Russian Federation is a permanent member of the United Nations Security Council. They're supposed to be a leading member of the United Nations. They're meant to promote peace and security and ensure peace and security throughout the globe. They're one of the original members under the Soviet Union, if you consider them to be an extension of that, under the United Nations. One of the original signatories. And they refused to cooperate with a UN-led impartial investigation into the war. And do you know what they will claim it as? They will claim it as fake information, misinformation that is pushed by the West and by Ukraine. In a statement and in a report that they failed to comply and assist with. They have also failed to allow the United Nations to carry out tasks of humanitarian aid to areas such as the occupied areas of Ukraine. So, considering everything that has happened, I am going to push this question to you. At this point, after starting the largest land war in Europe since the end of World War II, since using the permanent member state veto on the UN Security Council to block any UN Security Council resolutions and forcing it to the General Assembly, that they're failing to allow UN humanitarian corridors into occupied regions of Ukraine, and for failing to comply with any kind of investigative processes by the United Nations Human Rights Council, the question is that I push to you is, do you think, and please leave it in the comments of the video, do you think that Russia should still be part of the United Nations? If so, why or why not? I'm very interested to hear, because I've been thinking about this since I started researching today, and I was reading about this, and I've been listening to the news, listening to the news from other organizations like DW and everything else, and kind of seeing, what's happening and watching the UN Security Council still, so tell me if you think that Russia should still be part of the United Nations in the comments of the video, and tell me why or why not, because I'm very interested to read, what your thought process is on that, because I don't know how I feel about it. I think it's important, but at this point, I also don't. So it's, that's kind of I'm interested to see what you think. And so with that, we jump down here and over to Georgia, where here in Georgia, there's a huge line at the border to get into Georgia. Those with Russian flags or military insignias are being turned back. The border can only be crossed inside a vehicle, so many are trying to bribe others for a spot in the car to accept the crossing, or on scooters. Take a look.
Где? На границе именно?
They are fleeing. Everyone's happy dandy, happy-go-lucky with the war until suddenly the war begins to affect them. Well, I appear to have screwed this one up. Sorry about that. Let's see here. Over here in Afrin, Syria. Over here in Afrin, Syria, so unidentified people fired several artillery mines in the direction of the military unit of Turkish armed forces. in the canton of Afrin, including those, according to preliminary data, the casualties and destruction were avoided. Fighters of the Kurdish forces are suspected of being involved in the attack. In response to the shelling, Turkish Air Force aircraft and the Ankara-controlled mercenaries attacked objects of the Arab Kurdish forces of the Syrian armed forces in the province of Aleppo. There is no information yet about the victims. And you can see the immense amount of explosions there. Keep in mind, these kids, I understand that there's children around with this video, but they're just kind of laughing, if you notice. These kids are really used to this at this point in the war here in Syria. They really are. They're just really, really used to this. At least 70 people are dead after a migrant boat crashed off of the coast here near Tartus, Syria. Syrian authorities began to find bodies off the coast of Tartus on Thursday afternoon. The Syrian Transport Ministry has quoted survivors saying that the boat left the Lebanon's North Minyeh region on Tuesday, and between 120 and 150 people were on board, bound for Europe. Lebanese Transport Minister Ali Hamieh said 20 survivors are being treated in Syrian hospitals. And I see a lot of people in the chat are chiming into that UN thing. And I'll chime in a little bit too. I think, in my opinion, but in my opinion, personal opinion, regarding the Russia-UN thing, I think Russia should be relegated to being, an observer in the United Nations, not necessarily a participant, but an observer. Similarly, like Taiwan and I believe North Korea is in the same status too, and I believe Palestine. I believe that is. I don't think that they should hold any power or any votes, but I think that they should still be kind of with it, but not really have any power in the United Nations. They should be relegated to an observer status. Oh wow. Okay. So we got this, and then we have some a little bit of breaking stuff. That hasn't been added to the map yet, everybody. So right now, widespread protests are ongoing with a rising death toll. The Iran Human Rights reported that at least 50 protesters have been killed by security forces, with most reported in Babol, Amal, Razvan, and Shar. Protesters continue into the night in Mashhad, Marvast, Kudast, Karaj, Hashturgd, Sananjaj, Tabriz, Shiraz, Rasht, Kazan, Karchak, Qom, and Tehran, despite the internet blackout. Martial law has been declared in several neighborhoods in Tehran, and law enforcement officers were seen shooting at protesters, including kids who were observing. And yes, we do have the video of that.
جامعه دومه شب جمعه ملت میخوان خیابون تظاهرات میکنن.
And here is something rather shocking. Take a look. So these are a couple of bystanders. They're watching out their house window at everything going on. A couple of them, including a couple of children who are at this window. Watch. Just unbelievable. Take a look. Yep, just opening fire on literally anybody and everybody. Artist Juan Declan published a short animation in honor of Masa Amini and the brave Iranians. Just a little short. This is quickly going into a revolution, by the way. And when I mean that, and I truly do mean that, because the breaking news coming in right now is that the city of Oshneva is now completely under control of protesters. So that's what's been coming. So that's coming in as we're talking here. There is currently currently under the complete control of protesters. There is no more police or security force presence there. They are completely under their control. So once again, this city is now completely under protester control. There is no security forces or police presence in this city, in the city of Oshneve, inside of Iran. So it is completely under protester control. JLS, do you think the Iranian regime could be overthrown anytime soon? Certainly. Iran has really kind of screwed itself. So the thing is, Iran through the 70s and the 80s had a large democracy, pretty good democracy there. A lot of people were abroad. The 60s, 70s, and 80s, they kind of had a nice kind of democracy, pro-democracy thing going. Then you have the Iranian Revolution. And, of course, you have, a whole lot, the SAS really had a big thing about that, too. But the embassy in Tehran and all sorts of stuff happening, the Iranian Revolution. And it also didn't help that the Iran-Iraq War was also happening, which is, think, World War I in the 70s between the country of Iran and Iraq. Pretty brutal fighting. But this really did not allow for a good security situation inside the country. And then so there's a revolution. Well, a theocracy or a religious government took over under the Ayatollah. And the Ayatollah basically is the supreme leader of the country. So you have the prime minister, you have then you have the president, and then you have the Ayatollah. So they then became kind of a powerhouse in the region militarily, and they what ends up happening is they are now trying to use more subtle means to gain influence in the region, sending weapons to the Houthi rebels in Yemen, which overthrew the government in Yemen, backing groups during the insurgency era in Iraq. Many of the organizations in Iraq were backed by Iran. They're Iranian trained, which is how they learned how to make a lot of IEDs and a lot of IEPs there in the country. Things like Muqtada al-Sadr in Iraq, the Sharia cleric that we saw that was infiltrated the Green Zone and caused a lot of violence there, he is Iranian-backed, which is why Iranian-backed groups are plastering his poster everywhere. Roughly, when I was in Syria, there was roughly an estimated 70,000 Iranian fighters that had transported across Iraq and into Syria, which is why there is U.S. presence in Jordan, is to prevent and assist coalition forces in stopping Iranian fighters going there. Of course, we killed General al-Soleimani when the Baghdad embassy protests were ongoing in 2020 because he was one of the major leaders of the Quds Force, and he was planning on assisting the reason we killed him, by the way. A lot of people were like, why would we assassinate a foreign diplomat? Like, that's against diplomatic law. The man landed in Baghdad International Airport. What you didn't hear about is the other guy he was with, which was the leader of Kataib Hezbollah, who was getting ready to finish the assault on the U.S. Embassy Baghdad compound. They were getting ready to storm it. What you didn't see in all of those wonderful CNN videos that were focused on watching the walls and watching us sitting on top of the rooftops was the bunch of guys with the AK-47s and RPGs that were sitting behind the tent that was sitting on Al-Kindi Street. That was the situation in the Baghdad embassy protest. They were waiting for something to happen, and then we blew up the guys that were planning the rest of the assault. That's why we killed General al-Soleimani. It was an immediate danger threat. That's how Iran works. That's how Iran works. They're trying to push their influence in a bunch of other regions. This has led to them being sanctioned. That on top of that, and them also trying to get a nuclear weapon, which, considering everyone and their mother signed a non-proliferation treaty, having more countries get nuclear weapons is not exactly the great thing to happen, especially when you have a power in the Middle East that's trying to subjugate and extend their power in many ways forceful means. Them getting a nuclear weapon is a really, really bad thing because, you know, who do they really hate? Saudi Arabia launching a nuclear. I can totally see Iran launching a nuclear weapon at Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia produces a lot of the world's oil, of course. Yes, everything is about money in this world. So that's, you know, kind of bad if you live in Europe or anywhere else that gets any oil from the government subsidized Saudi Aramco. It's also really bad because it's two religious groups on opposite ends of the Islamic spectrum that really hate each other and really want to kill each other. And also, anyone using a nuclear weapon kind of doesn't lead to a great kind of butterfly effect of everyone using a nuclear weapon. So this has led to the economic situation in Iran not being all that great because of sanctions and arms embargoes. It has led to a lot of issues for Iran and a lot of the people suffering. The regime has cracked down very heavily on anybody that's there. We've showed videos here prior to this of them beating people quite heavily. They shot down a Ukrainian airline jet, if you remember that. They shot down the Ukrainian airline jet back in 2020. Like, these are not very good. Their government is not very good people. They're not, it's not a very inclusive government. And they impose their version of Sharia law. And so the people are probably pretty fed up with it. I certainly would be. And so I can totally see them overthrowing the government. It was called for on day one. They're like, screw this guy. They're like, screw wearing hijabs, and you know what? Screw the government too. Screw the Ayatollah. We saw them ripping down his picture, and now they've taken control of a city. Yes, I can see the government being overthrown. There's enough angry people that have just had enough. While it may seem like an all of a sudden thing for Iran, it's not. There's a lot of reason behind it. There's a lot of history behind why these people feel this way. It's something that's been building for a long time. Iran doesn't give you a lot of good insights into the country itself outside of whatever they want to portray, because Iran has government-run news channels. So it's not, you don't really get to see a lot of Iran from your average Iranian perspective. You see it from the way Iran wants you to see it. And that is being broken right now, and a lot of people are not, it's not going very well for them. A lot of people are tired of the way they live there. And they would like a better life and future. So I 100% see the government getting overthrown in Iran. They have to very brutally suppress the population. This is probably going to devolve into a civil war, I can imagine, much like much of the Arab Springs did. An explosion at a mosque in Kabul's Green Zone has occurred. It was at the mosque of Wazir Muhammad Akbar Khan. At the moment, up to 23 people have been killed and dozens have been reported injured. There's not an exact number being reported right now, as the Taliban reported that all the victims of the attack were civilians. The mosque is located in the government area near the Taliban Interior Ministry building, which was probably the reason of the attack, since the employees of the institution gathered to pray there. More accurate information at this point is not known, but the Taliban also suppress a lot of media information coming out about these attacks. So we will probably find out some more in the couple of days to come, but take a look. Get a couple photos here. And so that is the situation there in Kabul. It's very likely that that could have been an Islamic State attack. We know that they're very highly active, and they do target a lot of mosques there in Kabul. Up in Mongolia, The ex-president of Mongolia has a message for both Russians and Ukrainians. The ex-president is supporting Ukraine and has urged Russians not to go to war against Ukraine. In fact, he suggests that Buryats and Tuvans, which are ethnic Mongolians that live in Russia, flee the mobilization and return to their homeland of Mongolia itself.
No, since the start of this bloody war, ethnic minorities who live in Russia suffered the most. The Buryat Mongols, Tuva Mongols, and Kalmyk Mongols have suffered a lot. They have been used as nothing more than cannon fodder. Hundreds of them are wounded. Thousands of them have been killed. We the Mongols will meet you with open arms and hearts as well. I also have a message to those being forced to fight Putin's war in Ukraine. Don't shoot Ukrainians. Don't shoot your sisters and brothers, children and elders. Do not kill that country. Do not kill their freedom. Ukraine has a full right to exist. Finally, I have a message to brave people of Ukraine and to President Zelensky. Thank you for your bravery and leadership. The best side of the world is with you. You are an inspiration. When you win, all people will win. No dictatorship lasts forever. The united will of people's freedom will always prevail. Slava Heroyam.
So a very kind message coming from Mongolia and the former president of Mongolia. It's kind of nice to see that. You don't really hear a whole lot from Mongolia very often, so it's kind of cool. He seems very nice. We jump down here and into Africa, where we have a couple of different updates. First of all, coming from the Tigray region of Ethiopia, an area that has already suffered quite extensively. In fact, 90% of the people in the Tigray region require humanitarian aid to survive. The International Commission of the Human Rights Experts released a report on yesterday, 9/22, stating that they believe that crimes against humanity have been committed in Tigray. Serious ongoing human rights violations, including extrajudicial killings, rape, sexual violence, and the starvation of civilians as a method of warfare. Tigrayan forces likely also committed serious human rights abuses mounting to war crimes, including large-scale killings of the Amhara civilians, rape and sexual violence, looting and destruction of civilian property in Kobo and Shena on August and September of 2021. The chief of Adar Referral Hospital in Mekelle reported a drone attack in the city of Sadia Hawasi area on 9/23 and wounded a 60-year-old cattle herder who died on the way to the hospital. You get this from the United Nations once again. In Uganda, more confirmed cases of Ebola have arisen, as well as several confirmed deaths. The Ministry of Health of Uganda reported that 4 more cases of Ebola were confirmed in the last 24 hours, adding to the total of 11 confirmed cases. 3 new deaths were recorded, leading to 11 cumulative confirmed and probable deaths. 19 suspected and 6 confirmed cases were hospitalized, and 58 contacts were also identified. And we can see this coming from the Ministry of Health of Uganda. Down here, coming from Johannesburg, South Africa, the world ended up celebrating World Rhino Day, which was on the 22nd, or yesterday, initially declared by WWF South Africa. There are only about 25,000 rhinos left in the world, and they are considered critically endangered. The UN Office of Drugs and Crime, or UNODC, supports member states to end illegal poaching, selling of rhino horn, and preserve the rhino as they play a crucial role within the ecosystem. You see that coming from the UN Office of Drugs and Crime. And from China Xinhua News, which is the Chinese state-run news media organization. And then from WWF. Jump down here into South America, where in Argentina, at least 3 people were killed after an explosion that sparked a fire at an oil refinery in southern Argentina on Thursday. The blast happened in the early hours of Thursday morning, and the subsequent blaze destroyed 6 lorries or transport vehicles. The cause of the fire is under investigation, but the Nicaraguan provincial government is said as of yesterday and today. Take a look. Looks like the night turned to day there for a moment. It's a heck of an explosion. Up here in Puerto Rico, we have an update from Puerto Rico regarding Hurricane Fiona. About 926,500 homes and businesses are still without power as of Friday morning. 5 days after Hurricane Fiona hit, causing an island-wide power outage for roughly 3.3 million people. The White House has approved an expedited major disaster declaration for Puerto Rico to get federal resources out quickly. And Hurricane Fiona has killed at least 5 people across the Caribbean, 1 in Guadalupe, 2 in Puerto Rico, and 2 within the Dominican Republic. Here we have that update coming from the White House. Near Mexico City, in Michoacan, Mexico, a magnitude 6.9 earthquake struck the region. Powerful 6.9 earthquake struck Mexico early Thursday, causing at least 2 deaths and damaging buildings and setting off landslides. The earthquake struck shortly after 1 a.m. on Thursday, just 3 days after a 7.6 magnitude earthquake shook western and central Mexico. The U.S. Geological Survey said Thursday's earthquake, like Monday's, was centered in the western state of Michoacan near the Pacific coast. The epicenter was about 29 miles southwest of Anguilla, Michoacan, at a depth of about 15 miles. Mexico City Security Ministry said that a woman died shortly after the quake alarm was activated when she fell on stairs in her home and hit her head. A man died of a heart attack after the quake struck. Man, there's been a ton of stuff that has been happening when it comes to like natural disasters. We've had hurricanes, we've had tsunamis, we've had a ton of earthquakes, we have had droughts, we have had volcano eruptions. Like, what is going on in the world? What have we done? What have we done? Up here in New York, the Elena Zelenska, who is the First Lady of Ukraine, has begun what is called the Elena Zelenska Foundation. The purpose of which is described of helping life win was presented by First Lady of Ukraine Elena Zelenska at the Metropolitan Opera in New York on September the 22nd. The First Lady announced that the focus of the foundation will be on the individual person and the well-being, and said that there was a look for attract the funds of both foreign and Ukrainian businesses, international agencies, and funds, and anyone who would like to invest in the restoration of Ukraine's human capital. And so that's something we're going to be looking at and seeing if maybe we can add that to the stream as well. To get another foundation in there for you. But there is the Elena Zelenska Foundation, which has been founded by the First Lady of Ukraine. And that allows us to jump into the interesting news of the night. And I'm actually going to start over here in China, where we jump over here and we find that 2 dinosaur eggs the size of cannonballs were discovered in China. The first, 2 cannonball-sized dinosaur eggs, filled with crystals, have been discovered by paleontologists in China. The fossilized spherical eggs belong to a previously unknown dinosaur species and were found packed with calcite crystals. They were unearthed in the Quenshan Basin in East China's Anhui province. The 2 eggs have been classified with the name of Shizingolithus quinshanesis, making them newly described U species. U species, U genera, and U families are taxonomic names for dinosaurs known only from their eggs. According to researchers, the eggs are nearly spheroid and roughly the cannonball size, with a length of 4.1 to 5.4 inches, or 105 to 137 millimeters, and the width of 3.9 to 5.3 inches, or 99 to 134 millimeters. It's very interesting. It's a dinosaur egg geode. How cool is that? It's a dinosaur egg geode. Like, I love dinosaurs. I think everybody loves dinosaurs. Jurassic Park was hands down one of my favorite movies growing up. And I really find geodes and I find this kind of stuff very fascinating. Like, I have an entire rock collection. That second shelf up, so I have all of the manuals and everything. That second shelf up has a bunch of different geological stuff that I have. I have a huge, or I say huge, but I have a huge fossil that it has a bunch of, it's from my state that I live in, but it has a bunch of shells. Because where I used to live at used to be underwater millions of years ago. It used to be a giant sea. And I have a sediment deposit that has a bunch of shells, and it has coral and everything that's been fossilized all together inside of one area, inside of one giant rock. It's really cool. I've never seen anything like it, and I'm sure there's probably a museum somewhere that would love to have it, but they can have it sometime when I am ready to part ways with it. Something that me and my grandfather, who sadly passed away, actually found. So. But I have a bunch of other stuff over there too. I have a collection of different geological stuff. But if you want to have more information on this, you can go and check out ScienceDirect.com or check it out at Live Science as well. Do you think that we would be able to make Jurassic Park thing real in any way within, let's say, 30 years from now? 30 years, pushing it. That's probably not in 30 years. I can see maybe 50 or 60 years. But if there's quite a few movies now, there used to only be 3, but there's quite a few movies now that say there's a reason why it's considered a bad idea to bring dinosaurs back. Yes, Owl Kitty version. God, I love Owl Kitty. I love Owl Kitty. Thank you, Aravis, for bringing that up. And over here in Prague, another very interesting development for on the historical side, but of human history. Approximately 7,000-year-old structure was found near Prague. Archaeologists digging near Prague have discovered the remains of a Stone Age structure that's older than Stonehenge and even the Egyptian pyramids. The enigmatic complex known as a roundel, nearly 7,000 years ago during the late Neolithic or Stone Age, or New Stone Age, a local farming community may have gathered in this circular building, although its true purpose is unknown. The excavated roundel is large, about 180 feet or 55 meters in diameter. And while it's too early to say anything about the people building this roundel, it's clear that they were part of the stroked pottery culture, which flourished between 4900 BC to about 4400 BC. Wow, that is pretty big. There's not a lot of you can't, it's not very easy to identify stuff that's this old. Not everything survives the test of time, quite like Stonehenge and and like the Great Pyramids. Even the oldest of pyramids. So it's pretty cool to be able to see this. Very interesting. Yeah. I mean, because you gotta think, a lot of this stuff, it's so early in history, most of the stuff that they had at their disposal to use to construct these buildings and to construct what they had, it's called the Stone Age or Neolithic Age for a reason. I mean, sticks and stones. That's what they had. They didn't have metalworking or metallurgy at this point, or smithing or mining or anything else. They had what you can find around you, what you can pick up off the forest floor, which is stones and sticks and whatever you can pick off of plants or use sinew from the animal that you've killed. That is what they had available. And so there's just not a lot of evidence. The further back you go, it's just, there's not enough there. There's not enough physical evidence to really, understand people very well. I think Kurzgesagt puts it best. Take a random handful of trash and throw it into your backyard, bury it for 100,000 years, and then wait. And then the person 100,000 years from now is trying to figure out from your trash what you were like as a person and what was interesting to you. That's pretty much archaeology for this early. I mean, there's just not a whole lot to go off of. But it's still really cool that you can find stuff like that. Very, very cool. But with that, that's actually all of the news in the world today. So quite a bit of news, quite a bit of interesting stuff ongoing. Unfortunately, a lot of bad stuff ongoing. But, I mean, so is the way of the world. Now, we've done yet another long stream. I think we're going on a couple hours now at this point. 2 hours, 25 minutes, and 27 seconds. So, if you guys were here or not, obviously this means that somewhere upwards of 2,000 people during the time that I have talked, upwards of 2,000, probably quickly moving to about 2,500 people have died of starvation while we have sat here and talked on the news. And so with that, please be mindful of the fact that that's happening throughout the world. The whole point of the news is for you to be informed. An informed population makes intelligent decisions, whether that be political or what have you. But an informed population is one that's able to make a change in the world around them and to make a meaningful change and provide some kind of progress. Now, the whole point of this channel is to be a nonprofit charitable news organization. And that is why we are doing this like we are. If you go and check out the video description below, you're going to see a ton of organizations down there. And it looks like we have quite a few more to be adding too, as we have plenty that have been submitted by you guys yourselves. Please keep them coming. But also because, you know, we're starting to see some stuff on the news too. But please, please be sure to check out the video description and to support those organizations. Help us be the news that gives back. Like I said, upwards of about 2,500 people have died since of starvation, 1 every 4 seconds since we started talking here on the news. And if you're watching this for your short, about 11-minute time frame of what you're interested in, then that means upwards of 165 to 200 people have died in the time that you have talked. Many more are currently going into starvation. And so please be sure to check out the video description and help these people. Help us get back directly to the people affected by the news stories that we talk about here every single day. And if you can't give a lot to these organizations, please give a little. If you can't give anything at all, then help us grow this project and help us bring more people here to watch the news, so that way we can give back and have more of an impact as a community overall. And I thank you very much for the support you've already given us, and even more so to the organizations below and the continued support that you continue to give them as well. And we hope that you, your family, and your friends are safe. And if not, we hope that you find that safety and security in the very near future. Please be safe and have a wonderful Saturday. We will be streaming tomorrow at 5 p.m. Eastern Time, 4 p.m. Central. For those that may be in other locations in the world, that would make it a little bit more of an easier time for you guys to be able to participate live with us. And we hope to see you then tomorrow. But other than that, we hope that you have a wonderful night and a wonderful Saturday. And we can't wait to see you guys again. My name is Paul from the New News. And have a fantastic night, everybody. Bye now.
Going home, Russian soldiers, going home. Бо ми всіх вас тут змішаємо з багном. І стоять до волноваги, і чудно кличе, діти нахуй. Тут працює ЗСУ і ТМО. Нам не треба ні конфлікту, ні війни. Та ми готові всіх вас звать до сатани. Тисячі вже полягло, і все більше шлейфуйло. То для них нема нічого, крім труни. Going home, Russian soldiers, going home. Бо ми всіх вас тут змішаємо з багном. І стоять до волноваги, і чудно кличе, діти нахуй. Тут працює ЗСУ і ТМО. Вызволять пришел, братишка, ну привет. На моей земле тебе один ответ. Нашим людям с кирпичом, даже танки и бачок. Вам не взять нас и за 100 000 лет. Going home, Russian soldiers, going home. Бо ми всіх вас тут змішаємо з багном. І стоять до волноваги, і чудно кличе, діти нахуй. Тут працює ЗСУ і ТМО. Mr. Putin, on behalf of all our guys, no one's scared of your nuclear device. You can take your top 11, shove it up your wrinkled bum. Oh, we'll come and help you fit it in your skull. Russian soldiers going home. Бо ми всіх вас тут змішаємо з багном. І стоять до волноваги, і чудно кличе, діти нахуй. Тут працює ЗСУ і ТМО. Going home, Russian soldiers going home. Бо ми всіх вас тут змішаємо з багном. І стоять до волноваги, і чудно кличе, діти нахуй. Тут працює ЗСУ і ТМО. Russian soldiers going home. Бо ми всіх вас тут змішаємо з багном. І стоять до волноваги, і чудно кличе, діти нахуй. Тут працює ЗСУ і ТМО. Going home, Russian soldiers going home. Бо ми всіх вас тут змішаємо з багном. І стоять до волноваги, і чудно кличе, діти нахуй. Тут працює ЗСУ і ТМО. Ідіть нахуй.